Hi, Laverne.
Good evening.
You home these days? Are you home these days?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I'm home. Yeah. Yeah. I'm here until mid-April.
And where do you go then?
I'm going to Mexico City.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about that. I'm going with my sister and her three friends on a road scholar trip. So we'll see.
I think Mexico City's, at least parts of it, are pretty neat.
Yeah, they say it's wonderful. Yeah.
Mm.
Just hopefully it's safe.
It's probably not a bad time to go weather-wise, too.
Yeah, it gets real hot there.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, when my parents were still alive, they lived in Texas.
Oh, really?
And we would go down, particularly after my father died, we would go down 2 or 3 times a year to visit my mother and make sure everything was okay.
Yeah.
And for a long time, we would go in May and October, but then May got to be pretty hot, so we started going in April.
Mm-hmm.
And then October got to be pretty hot on average, so we started going in November.
Yeah, it's hot there. Hot.
And just I think on Monday it was supposed to be in the 90s down there.
Mm. Wow. Yeah.
It's not the way it used to be in February.
No, I know. Look, same thing around here. It's crazy. It was cold today, but it gets going to be warm next week.
So I see we've got Mike's with us. Hello, Mike. And Nadir and Nancy are with us. Hi, folks.
Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Um, it's 7 o'clock. Why don't we get started? We've got a couple things on the agenda plus one unanticipated thing. Um, First of all, the meeting is being recorded. We have three matters to address tonight. The first scheduled is the application from the town of Dover for a special permit to um, replace culverts in Noanut Brook. Second is a discussion of the 40B application on the Trout Brook project. And the third last minute item is a request by Mark Conrad to withdraw without prejudice his application for a special permit to construct an accessory dwelling unit at 3 Claybrook Road. The board members may recall I sent out an email to get dates and was going to do it on March 26th, but it turns out under the new revised bylaw for accessory dwelling units, there's for a detached ADU, you first have to apply to the planning board for site plan review and do that at least 10 days before you apply to the Board of Appeals for a special permit. And the applicant, Mark Conrad, didn't do that, not realizing the law had changed. So he has requested that he be allowed to withdraw without prejudice his application for a special permit. Um, so does anybody have any objection to that?
No,
No
Um,
objection.
Then I
no.
would entertain a motion to permit him to withdraw his application without prejudice.
Second.
I need a motion first.
Oh,
So
you
moved.
need a motion first. That was a
So that's a motion. Do I have a second?
second.
No, you can't second it. Somebody
Can't
else has.
say second. Okay.
All,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
I.
Okay, the motion passes. Okay, so the second matter, and by the way, we will reschedule that hearing after he refiles his application, whenever that is. Second matter tonight is the application by the town of Dover through its highway department for a special permit to replace culverts on Noanut Brook, on Willow Street and Dedham Street, which are within 150 feet of the Charles River. Is there any objection to waiving the reading of the notice of hearing?
No.
Hearing none, we will deem the reading of the notice waived. So for those in attendance, I will briefly explain the procedure. First, the applicant presents to the board whatever information he or she thinks the board should consider. The board will then ask questions or discuss the issues with the applicant. Other town officials or residents will then have an opportunity to speak. After the discussion concludes, we will close the hearing. And after the hearing closes, the board will discuss the matter further to the extent necessary and then take a vote. Once the hearing is closed, there's no further input from the applicant or anyone else in attendance. It's just a discussion by the board. So as background for this application, let me just explain that we have a town bylaw 185-29.d that requires a special permit from the Board of Appeals for any work done within 150 feet of the Charles River, which is what we have here. The statute's kind of funny because 185-29B starts out by prohibiting any construction projects within 150 feet of the Charles River. But then 29C says that it doesn't prohibit the repair, reconstruction, or restoration of any structure or facility in existence at the time of the adoption of the bylaw. I'm not sure when that was, but I think it was after the culverts in question here. But in addition, 185-29D allows construction or alteration of a street, pavement, or other impervious surface within the setback if it will not alter the natural pattern of drainage into a river or stream, and it will not alter the rate, volume, or physical, chemical, or biological characteristics of runoff within the 150-foot setback. In addition, unlike a lot of the applications that we've had under this, there's an additional subsection 185-29E that specifically addresses stream crossings, including expressly stating that it includes Noanet Brook, which we have here, so long as it will not significantly restrict the flow of the brook and will not increase the risk of flooding of such brook in the event of a 100-year storm within a 24-hour duration, and if it will enable access to a parcel of land that may not otherwise be accessed without such crossing. Finally, under the bylaw, the board in reaching its decision may consult with the planning board and the Conservation Commission, and any such project that's proposed shall be in accordance with any order of conditions issued by the Conservation Commission. So that's the legal background. What we'll do at this point is give the applicant, Town of Dover Highway Department, and its representatives the opportunity to describe to the board what the project entails and what they are doing to make sure they comply with the bylaw. So I think we have Caitlin Glass with us.
Yep. Kevin, was there anything you wanted to say to start?
No, I was just gonna introduce you both. So I'm Kevin McCabe, the DPW director. With me are our technical consultants on this project, the design engineers, Caitlin Glass and Scott Salvucci. So I'll turn it over to Caitlin.
Great.
Thanks. We also have Kendra Robinson on, who's the engineer that's been working on the project. I have a brief PowerPoint presentation I can run through, if that works. So I'll share my screen and just walk through a few slides.
Absolutely.
So let's see. Okay. All right, so I'm Caitlin Glass. I'm a civil engineer and project manager from Woodard & Curran, and we're here to present the project on behalf of the town of Dover. As Alan mentioned, the project includes replacing two existing culverts. One is beneath Willow Street and one is beneath Dedham Street. And the project will require a special permit under the zoning bylaw section that Alan mentioned. The replacement of the two culverts is really driven by the need to replace and improve the existing infrastructure that's failing to help promote public safety and reliable roadways. And the project has been designed to not alter the natural pattern of drainage into the Charles River and Nonet Brook, and will not alter the rate volume or negatively alter the characteristics of runoff within the setback as required. So I just have a few slides I'll walk through to give a little bit more detail on each of the culvert replacements. So starting with Willow Street, this is an aerial map to kind of orient you. The red dot shows the location of the Willow Street culvert, which is an equalization culvert on a causeway at the confluence of Nonet Brook and the Charles River, which you can see on the left. The location of the Dedham Street culvert is shown as the blue dot. So the existing culvert at Willow Street is a stone and concrete open bottom culvert. It's about 900 feet downstream of the Dedham Street culvert. And it was identified as a high priority replacement in the town of Dover's 2022 hazard mitigation plan due to its deteriorating condition. In August of last year, the culvert was damaged during a large storm event where the head wall and guardrail on the upstream side detached from the structure and fell into the brook. After that storm, Mass DOT performed a dive inspection and found the culvert to be in serious condition. Currently, the crossing is supported by steel plates across the roadway and Jersey barriers on the upstream end where the guardrail has failed. So the culvert is really in need of replacement due to its deteriorated condition. Failure of this culvert could result in a complete roadway failure, making the roadway impassable, and could potentially result in flooding on neighboring residential properties. So we're proposing to replace the existing culvert with a 7-foot high by 9-foot wide concrete box culvert in its place. Sizing was determined through a hydraulic evaluation where we found that the 7-foot by 9-foot culvert would preserve the existing capacity of the culvert while maintaining the natural reversal of flow and preventing additional flow from the Charles River from ponding between the Dedham Street and Willow Street culverts. In addition to preserving the existing flow capacity, the proposed culvert will improve aquatic and non-aquatic organism movement and provide a structurally sound replacement to prevent future failure. So here you can see a plan view where we're showing that the work included will be installing the box culvert and head walls, repaving the roadway, installing new guardrail, and implementing bank restoration along the downstream end of the culvert where the bank has been eroded. And here's just a profile showing the replacement. And then moving on to Dedham Street. So this is the same map I showed you before. The red dot is the Dedham Street culvert, which is about 900 feet upstream of the Willow Street. So the existing culvert at the Dedham Street crossing is a 52-inch diameter corrugated metal pipe. It's in satisfactory condition, but it's undersized. So it causes regular blockage, causing localized, or it's subject to regular blockage, which causes localized private property and roadway flooding. So the need for routine maintenance of this undersized culvert was to prevent roadway flooding was noted in the town of Dover's 2022 hazard mitigation plan. So similar to Willow Street, we're proposing to replace the existing culvert with a 7-foot high by 9-foot wide concrete box culvert in its place. Again, sizing was determined through a hydraulic evaluation. The 7-foot by 9-foot concrete box culvert will provide an increased flow capacity over existing conditions, which will improve aquatic and non-aquatic organism movement and provide a structurally sound replacement. Work will include installing the box culvert and head walls, repaving the roadway, and installing new guardrail. So I think that was really all I had. I'll stop sharing. So yeah, in essence, the project is really replacing 2 existing culverts to help improve, public safety and the reliability of the roadways.
Caitlin, has there been any application to the Conservation Commission for an order?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So we went in front of Concom for both projects, or for both culverts rather, we filed an NOI and we received an order of conditions. And we were waived from the scenic road requirement for the planning board.
Can you send that to me? The
I
order
sure
of
can.
condition?
Yep.
That should be part of the record. Were there any particular concerns that the Concom had or any conditions they imposed of significance?
No, they were really pretty standard. Yeah, we didn't, nothing noteworthy, I would say.
Is there anything else you'll need other than the special permit from the Board of Appeals?
We also need to get Army Corps approval, so we're going through that process as well right now, the PCN and DEP.
Army Corps of Engineers?
Yes.
And what's the status with DEP?
We received some comments that we responded to, and so we're waiting for their final approval.
Okay. What have you done in the way of establishing that this will comply with the bylaws requirements that that it not alter the natural pattern of drainage and not alter the rate, volume, or physical, chemical, or biological characteristics of runoff?
Well, I think the hydraulic modeling that we've done to look at the storm events, the culvert that we're replacing at Willow Street is essentially, the same capacity. So we're not increasing flow into the Charles River there. And we looked at the elevation of the 100-year storm events at both culverts and found that we were not increasing the elevation of either culvert.
Was any
Yeah,
kind
and Caitlin, just to add on to that, from a water quality perspective, Alan, we're not increasing any impervious area, so we're not anticipating any of the runoff to further degrade either water body, the Noannet Brook or Charles River.
Okay. Was there any report done that analyzes these issues, the runoff and so forth?
Yes, yeah. So the first thing that we did for the project was do a feasibility study where we evaluated different alternatives. And that report summarizes the different alternatives that we looked at and the results of the hydraulic modeling.
Can you share that with us?
Yes.
We'll need to look at that in order to see what's been done to demonstrate compliance with the bylaw requirements.
Sure.
Okay, anything else you want to present to us before we start asking more questions?
I didn't have anything else. I don't know, Kevin, was there anything you wanted to add?
No, I
Or
think
or
that covered
Scott?
it, so we'll certainly open it up for questions.
Okay, board members? Any questions?
How long will this take to do? Will the road will be blocked for a week, 2 weeks? Will it be like Claybrook Road or not that bad?
It'll be completely impassable for probably 3 to 4 months in the summer months.
Really?
Require dewatering. It's such a small area. The structure itself will be basically 3 pieces of precast, so they'll have to use the roadway for staging.
Oh, wow.
Kevin, will you phase that, Kevin? Will you do Dedham Street first and then Willow? Because how would
Yes.
the path run? Sorry.
So in layman's terms, I was unsuccessful in a one-stop grant, and I was looking for funding for both culverts, which obviously would have had to been phased because Willow will be a major detour for Denham. Since we're unsuccessful in that, and we've last year got the DER grant that covered the feasibility. and now, we're obviously in the final design and final permitting stages, as obviously we're bringing it to you folks now. So this year for town meeting will be Willow Street, and then we're concurrently going to put another one-stop grant in. So hopefully next summer would be Dedham Street construction if we're successful with that grant.
It's a 2-year project, basically.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wow.
So if you say 3 or 4 months on Dedham Street, I'm just thinking 3 or 4 months in Dedham Street, a long time.
Yes, that's a little bit farther upstream with less impoundment down there. So actually that probably could be more of a streamlined project because there's less water to dewater there. So essentially they would have to send up, hydro sacks, pump water out into kind of a sediment control device and pass that by so it's dry. But being that they're a 4-walled structure, there's no footings that need to be done. So, these get designed, get approved, get delivered to the site. They do that, dry the site out. So it's a relatively quick process. And that I think is a realistic timeline. Ordered and Current can certainly correct me if I'm misspeaking here, but it's a relatively very simple, straightforward project.
Kevin, did
Yeah.
you say that Willow Street, the Willow Street part of it would be 3 to 4 months?
Yes.
Okay, and then Dedham Street would be another few months on top of that?
Correct, but not this construction season. I'm going for an annual town meeting construction funding for just Willow Street. And then in the June, March, I think it opens, but June, the one-stop grants are due. So we'll be putting in a one-stop grant for construction funding for Dedham. So the anticipated timeline would be next summer. And hopefully we will be successful in the one-stop grant for construction funds for that portion of the project.
So Willow will be 2024, Dedham could possibly be 2025.
Correct.
Yep. Targeting
Yeah,
the
would be-
summer, low flow months of water level. And I would think, 3 to 4 months is probably total project. The shutdown of the roadway, the detour, that'll all depend on the contractor and their means and methods, but usually that goes a little quicker. They get the box culverts in, they backfill those, and they allow traffic to open back up, and then they're performing the rest of the work on the banks and the guardrail and the paving and things like that. And traffic is generally opened back up for the most part fairly quickly.
Mike, do you have any questions? You with us, Mike?
He was.
I see Mike, but I don't hear him. Oh, he's got his feedback problem again. Mike, can you
I'm
hear
on
me?
the phone too, so I got.
So Mike, do you have any questions at this point?
No, I think it's a fairly straightforward civil engineering, process. I don't, other than causing maybe a bunch of traffic problems, but that's, kind of the way it is. But, fairly straightforward.
Okay.
And certainly a lot less traffic impacts with a controlled, planned construction rather than some sort of failure and emergency response, right? So
Yes.
That's the goal here,
Retroactive action.
We will need to see the hydraulic modeling and the Concom order of conditions in order to see if we have any questions about those. Does anybody else have, any other board members have questions at this point? Any members of the public or other town officials have any questions or comments? Not hearing any. So we had tentatively scheduled a meeting for March 20 something.
26th.
Yeah, March 26th. Does that work for you folks to come back on March 26th for a follow-up after we've gotten a chance to look at the additional materials?
I would say so. Yeah.
That works. Yeah, that works for me.
Okay. We've already got that set up, so in terms of the board members scheduling, so that would be an easy way to do it. I have a trial the week before that, so I'm kind of tied up between now and then. Um,
So that's Tuesday.
yeah, that's a Tuesday,
Okay.
7 p.m. via Zoom, just like we're doing tonight. Okay, another question, does anybody at this point think we ought to do a site visit? Board members?
No, I don't need to go there. I walk by that Willow Street all the time. So I know exactly what that is. The metal plates have been there for years.
Yeah, well, will this get rid of the metal plates once you're done with the culvert?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That would be nice.
long time.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Can I
I'll
just ask one question? So when we get you the materials, if you do end up having any questions, you'll be able to provide those to us so that we'll have a response on the 26th and ideally streamline the response and answers to any questions.
what I can do is yes, I can ask the board members
Okay.
to submit any questions they have once we've had a chance to review the report so that you get them in advance of our next hearing date.
Great.
Sure, yeah, we want to make it as easy on everybody as possible.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to continue the hearing to March 26th at 7 p.m. via Zoom.
So moved.
You have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Second,
Aye, okay. So, so we will see you again on the 26th, and in the meantime, we look forward to getting those materials from you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Great.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so that's the end of that hearing for now. We now will move on to the Trout Brook 40B project. As I think probably everybody knows, we concluded the hearing on February 14th. Let me just get to my notes. We have 40 days from that date to issue a decision. And any decision that we make under the 40B statute requires a majority vote of the 3 full members of the board. Those members being Laverne and Nadir and myself. What we want to do at this point is to have a discussion by the board members of the application, the 40B application, and discuss any issues that the board members have, and then see what we want to do. So at this point, there is no opportunity for further input or comment from the applicant or from members of the public or other town officials. It's just the board and, if necessary, input from town council. We do have Nina Pickering-Cook with us. Hi, Nina. So let me just say to begin the discussion that one issue we have to deal with is whether there was a decision. Let me go back a step. There was a 2001 decision. The Board of Appeals back then had denied an application by an entity called the Farm Street Trust to do a 40B project consisting of 2 separate sites, neither of which was buildable under zoning bylaws, and have one of them be an affordable unit and the other one be market rate. And the Board of Appeals, this Board of Appeals in that case, denied the application on the ground that the lots were otherwise not buildable. That was appealed by the applicant to the Housing Appeals Committee, and the Housing Appeals Committee upheld the decision. And in doing so, they said that there was an expectation that so what was going to happen was that the Farm Street lot was going to have a market rate house on it, and it was otherwise not a buildable lot. And the Housing Appeals Committee said the expectation of the town was that that lot, which was unbuildable under the zoning bylaws, would remain vacant. Um, and that this would violate that expectation with no immediately tangible public benefit, because the Farm Street house would be the type of market rate house that was otherwise prohibited. So there's never been a case that anybody has been able to point to since then that says that that reasoning is no longer valid. And so the question for us is whether, first of all, that's a basis on which to deny the current application, and if so, whether we should, because even though we, under that decision, we can deny the application, we're not required to. It's simply a matter of considering the public need, the town's public need to preserve wetlands and so forth for lots that would otherwise be unbuildable. If we are not going to deny the application on that ground, then the question would be whether to grant the waivers they've requested of the specific bylaw provisions that they've identified, and what, if any, conditions we should impose on their application. The third possibility is that if we, so let me explain a little bit more background. If we deny the application under the Farm Street Trust decision, and if for any reason that our decision is overturned on appeal, under the 40B statute, the matter does not come back to the Board of Appeals. What happens is that the state agency simply grants the comprehensive permit that they have applied for. The agency would have an opportunity to impose any conditions that it considers appropriate, but it doesn't come back to our board to determine what, if any, conditions should be imposed. So one thing, if we do deny the application under the Farm Street Trust decision, there's nobody knows, from what I can gather, whether if we express our desires as to what would be appropriate conditions, whether the state agency would consider those and possibly impose them or not. One possibility is they simply grant the comprehensive permit without any conditions. Another possibility is that if they consider our proposed conditions reasonable, they would adopt those, some or all of them. So we need to talk about that tonight. So with that, what I'd like to do is open it up to the board members to talk about what their reaction is to the information presented during the hearing, and where you are in terms of whether to approve the application or not. So who wants to go first? Laverne.
I've written pages and pages here of negative feedback from 37 residents of our town that don't want this. I've got pages written about the site visits, where we get out of our cars and the water was up over our shoes, and Scott and Goddard met us at the property on a very rainy Monday. There were large puddles, active streams, backwash from the Charles River, Trout Brook, everywhere. Everywhere we went, water was over my shoes. And he was standing in the middle of the lots, vernal pools, pointing out markers above our head of where the foundations were going to be. And I'm sitting there going, am I on candid camera? This was, I thought, a bit absurd. So, you know, I have a feeling that with the scattered sites, with the sensitive areas, the river, the stream, all of the waivers that they want. I mean, you can look at my pages. I have pages here written. I don't think this is good for our town. I don't think the people that have lived here their whole life should have to put up with this. These are on our own assessors maps, unbuildable lots. They're unbuildable lots. Now they want to wave a magic wand and make them buildable. So, you know, I could go on for a long time, but I'll let somebody else speak now.
Well, Laverne, let me just say with respect to the waiver issue, as you know, there is a list, two-page list of provisions of the Dover bylaws that they have asked us to waive as part of any permit that we approve. And those waivers are standard waivers, from my experience, of the kinds of things that it's appropriate for them to be granted. Things like waivers from the setback or waivers from the amount of frontage that's required, waivers from shared driveways or doing test pits and that sort of thing. And there's, you know, we did have peer review consultants. Sean Reardon addressed all of the environmental issues. And everything presented to the board indicates, from what I understood, that there's no basis for denying their requested waivers should we otherwise be prepared to grant the permit.
It seemed like a lot of waivers to me on things that would be. I mean, why should we give so many waivers? I don't.
Well, the reason we
could give one waiver or two waivers, but not 11 waivers.
Laverne, the reason we give the waivers is because under the 40B statute, we're required to, unless there's some compelling reason not to. These are the kinds of things that typically get waived for a 40B project.
Well, the sense of the area and the water and the rivers, it was just not good. Mike, what do you think?
Well, Laverne, let me just say this. I agree with you. I have concerns about the wetness of the properties, the standing water when we did the site visit and so forth. But we don't have any input from anybody that says definitively that the proposed construction is going to make any of that worse. To the contrary, Sean Reardon's analysis, once they made the adjustments that they needed to in order to address concerns that he had, they were able to satisfy all those concerns. So I have myself profound concerns that this project, if it goes forward, may create various environmental issues with standing water and so forth. But the only evidence that's been presented to us is that they've met all the requirements, and at least in theory, the drainage provisions and so forth will not make things any worse. But with that, let me see if any other board members have any comments.
So I have a note on the January 25th meeting, and it was from Sean, and I've got it highlighted. It said, his ending comment said, there's nothing negative. They're not going to do anything more detrimental in the area and nothing to improve it, which I keep thinking about. I mean, they're doing a lot. They're putting some storm drainage in, more so than I think in a lot of neighborhoods houses. But, you know, I kept coming back to Sean's comments about, is this really going to, as I know it's an emotional situation, but is it really going to be detrimental? And I didn't get that. Sean never said that.
Well, I think that's the point I was trying to make, was that the input from Sean is that that what they have proposed passes muster in terms of environmental analysis.
Yes.
So where I sort of am struggling is just sort of what our charter is here, because it feels as if we have relatively binding precedent that's been kind of defined in our town. I think that the sort of holding from, and frankly the facts from from and the holding from the Farm Street Trust case feel very analogous to what we're dealing with, where, you know, sort of the expectations of the neighborhood are very, or sort of our zoning laws and kind of the ways in which things can or cannot be built would be very much tested or sort of frankly violated if this were to move forward. And I think it would trigger the very issues that were sort of identified in that case, in that it would sort of become open season for these non-buildable lots that are otherwise expected not to be touched. And very similar to that case where there was one property that was going to have, I think, a market rate house and another property that was going to be affordable. We have sort of a slightly more, the differential is greater here, where there is one affordable house to three market rate houses, sort of reinforcing the idea that there are multiple properties for which there is no sort of added value in terms of affordable housing being added.
Mike, you have any comments?
Yeah, I know Sean. I really admire Sean Reardon. He, you know, he was given a bunch of hay and he was able to spin some gold nuggets out of it. And I really admire his engineering expertise and competence. But all it is just a plan. It's a plan that, you know, you went through the numbers, you look at elevations, you look at, you look at, rainfalls and streams, and, we were trudging through the water when we did our site visit. But my favorite saying is from Mike Tyson: everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the mouth. So you don't really know what's going to happen until those houses are built and you have another wet season, and then you really see, where the plan went awry. So I think, and I would predict, that there's a lot of risk in what's been done. I just don't think that you don't know what's going to happen until it actually happens, and it could be detrimental to the neighbors or the people around. I looked at, I think it was the Mannion's house, when we were on the lots 1 and 2, and they're like right behind them, and it was just one big water puddle. It was just water everywhere, and it was. I cannot see how the basements of these houses won't take on water. And I just don't understand the rationale that it's, so many feet above the water table and there's no way it's going to get water. But yeah, there's going to be water everywhere, and the basements are going to fill with water. Why have the basements, which, are going to cause problems for the owners? That's kind of things that bug me about the project, from an engineering standpoint. As Nadir said, the 40B law was made to, develop properties with, a percentage of affordable housing, which, is kind of I guess a good thing. And there was nothing about scattered sites, and the scattered site rule that they're using here allows them to put market rate houses on separate lots with not addressing any of the local needs. I think if they really want to do it right, take 3 of the houses, make a market rate, or make them affordable, and they take 1 house and make it market rate. This way you would really, be using the land, the unbuildable land, with houses that would give people, the ability to afford and buy into Dover and send their kids to the Dover school system and all the wonderful benefits you get along with it. But they kind of flipped it. They're using the bare minimum, affordable housing, and the other 3 are market rates, of which they're going to sell for, as Lynn Sweet said, between 1.3 and 1.4 million. So, I mean, is that the real thrust behind 40B, is to build, big houses, expensive houses on lots that are formerly unbuildable? I just think there's something really wrong there. The Farm Street legal decision, if you go back, was never appealed in court. Has remained established law now for over 2 decades. I know Jonathan Silverstein, said there was some 2008, revision in the regulations or law that, accounted for that. But those 2008 regulations or law changes never addressed the Farm Street decision directly and never repealed it or did anything about it. Also, nothing in the PEL addresses the scattered sites, the non-continuous sites under 40B. And the applicant claims that the PEL findings somehow overrule the legal Farm Street Trust decision. And Mass Housing has no such authority under the 2008 regulations to do so. So I just think that this whole project has to be, adjudicated. It has to be brought to court. If they're serious about doing this, they need to bring it to court, fight it, and if they're right, okay, then they're right. But I just think that the people in that neighborhood, I think the ramifications and the risks that are presented by this piece of, this neighborhood that is continually, wet, and then, potentially adding more problems to the people, surrounding the developed lots that are, that have been deemed unbuildable. So my vote is, and I'm an associate, my vote doesn't count, but I would encourage actually all the rest of my fellow members to vote this down and let it go to the court and let them fight it out in the courts and, see what happens.
Okay. Well, I guess it's my turn to share my thoughts. As I was saying to Laverne, in response to Laverne, I do have real concerns about the water issues and wetlands and so forth, but we are constrained to make our decision based on the information presented during the hearing. And all the evidence we were given once the applicant had responded to Sean Reardon's comments and critiques and made modifications was that the applicant had satisfied all the requirements that relate to those environmental issues. So I don't see that as a basis for us to deny the permit. As much as I am concerned that with global warming, increasing intensity of storms and that sort of thing, I'm not sure that the applicable legal standards properly accommodate the likely impacts of those kind of weather events, but we're not allowed to just guess. We have to base our decision on the information presented to us, which says, as I understand it, that there's no basis there for denying the request for a permit. However, there is the Farm Street Trust case. There's no subsequent decision that says that's no longer good law. As I said earlier, we're not required to follow it, but if we think it's appropriate to follow it, as far as I can see, we have the authority to. The applicant, and particularly through their counsel, Jonathan Silverstein, has argued that that case no longer applies because the new regulations have been adopted And that those regulations, even though they don't expressly discuss scattered site projects, somehow imply that such projects are now acceptable. And also argues that the issuance of the PEL, the project eligibility letter, constitutes approval of the substance of their proposal for these scattered site buildings. I took a very close look at the regulations and the 40B statute. Nothing in the regulations that I can see addresses the use of scattered sites for a 40B project. Those regulations, the current regulations, were adopted apparently several years after the Farm Street Trust case. Nothing in the PEL itself expressly addresses the issue of scattered sites. Nothing in that letter discusses the trade-offs or makes any findings as to why this proposal is different or more desirable than the one in the Farm Street Trust case. The logic of the Farm Street Trust case, it seems to me to apply here. There certainly was an expectation by residents generally that these 4 lots would remain vacant, and that building on them would be a violation of the zoning bylaws with no immediate public benefit on 3 of the 4 lots, because 3 of the 4 lots would not have affordable housing, and they would otherwise not be buildable. There is also in the Farm Street Trust case the concern, which I think still applies, that if development of these lots is allowed, that makes it possible for other lots in town that would be otherwise considered unbuildable to be developed as part of a 40B project. And doing these kinds of projects, as the case discusses, would violate the general expectation of these lots not being buildable to a greater degree than typical comprehensive permit proposals. It seems to me it's fundamentally, there's a difference between something like the Red Robin Pastures project on Route 109, where you take a lot that is buildable and to some extent and make it buildable for a bigger project than would otherwise be allowed, as compared to this situation where you have lots that would not be buildable under any circumstance, and become buildable simply because it's one of the units is an affordable unit, and therefore would otherwise be permitted under 40B. So as in the Farm Street Trust project, the court there said, or the Housing Appeals Committee said, even though it's a small project with minimal impact, it violates expectations to a greater degree than the typical comprehensive permit proposal. That was 1 affordable unit and 1 market rate. Here we've got 1 affordable unit and 3 market rates. So if that one violated expectations to a greater degree, this one does so even more. It's not the typical situation where everybody thought that the land would be developed. It's just that it's more intense than would otherwise be expected. So as I say, we don't have to turn this application down on the basis of that case, but and based on my analysis of the legal principles, we're certainly entitled to. The current regulations state that the project eligibility determination addresses just 3 issues: whether the applicant is the required type of entity, whether the project is fundable by a subsidizing agency, and whether the applicant controls the site. And none of those issues has to do with the scattered site aspect of it. And nothing in the regulations says that the issuance of a project eligibility letter is conclusive evidence of the findings required under the regulations. So, bottom line is, I don't see anything. I understand the argument made by the applicant and their counsel that if you read the regulations in the context in which they exist and were adopted, that there's an argument to be made that scattered site projects are now allowed. He may be right that the Housing Appeals Committee will construe it that way, but I'm not convinced that that's the necessary result. So I also don't think because this is a small project, because the waivers they're seeking are all pretty standard waivers, and because there isn't anything about the project that requires any kind of extraordinary conditions to keep it from being unduly objectionable, if we deny the application on the basis of the Farm Street Trust case logic, and we get overturned, I don't see that there's any great harm, other than the expense involved, obviously, of the litigation. But to me, the policy represented by the decision in the Farm Street Trust case is a sound one, and that it makes sense to follow it until we're told that we can't. So on that basis, I come down on the side of denying the application based on the Farm Street Trust logic. I do
Mr.
think
Chairman,
that, yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I move to deny the application before us on the basis that the scattered site as proposed is not legally permitted.
Well, it's permitted, Mike. The problem is that the issue is whether we want to agree to it, even though we don't have to. The Farm Street Trust case says that the board could have approved the application, but that it was not required to for the policy reasons discussed in the case. So I don't think you want to move to deny the permit on the ground that it's not permitted under the Farm Street case. I think it would be better to move to deny the permit on the ground that under the logic of the Farm Street case, that it applies with equal, or if not greater, force here for the same reasons, but because it involves even more unbuildable lots being built on. Does that make sense?
Okay, I'll let you wordsmith it.
No, Alan, I also, you mentioned earlier, and I think that there is good logic in also identifying, to the extent that we are putting together a decision, the various conditions that we had discussed with the applicant and that the applicant had aligned around, because I think that those also made good sense to the extent that we are overturned, that it feels like we should present those to the Housing Appeal Committee. One more piece, because and I maybe should have started with the fact that I fully agree with what you outlined, and I think all of that makes good sense. The other piece to potentially consider is the issue that we talked about briefly during the hearing related to the addition of the window on the front facade, and the sort of outwardly visible distinction that would exist with the affordable house having an unfinished space that was visible from the outside, and the others that would have a finished space, which I think would violate kind of the understanding that the funding agency had, that the houses would be indistinguishable from the exterior.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So here's what I was thinking in terms of procedural process, and that is that we clearly there's a sentiment here to, I think, to deny the application under the Farm Street Trust case. So I think it makes sense to entertain a motion along the lines of what Mike was suggesting. If that passes, then I think the thing to do is to have a second motion along the lines of, if our decision gets overturned on appeal, then we would ask the state agency to consider imposing certain specified conditions, such as what Nadir just suggested. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. Can you make a denial with just, I have a whole paragraph that I have created for denial, but when you deny something, can it just be one sentence?
Well, what we would do,
Okay.
Laverne, is we have a motion to deny the application
Yep.
with a kind of basic reference to the reason for it.
Mhm.
What we would then do is we will draft up a written decision that would explain in more detail the basis for our vote.
Okay.
And so, you know, whatever language you have, we can take a look at in drafting the decision, and to the extent it's appropriate, incorporate that into the written decision. But it doesn't need to be in the vote itself. But
Okay.
why don't you go ahead and say, can you give us a sense of what you've got?
Well, this is kind of what I said, you know, I'd like to make a motion to deny the 40B application from Robert Recchia Builders for the project of 4 housing units to be affordable on 4 scattered sites. And then I named on Trout Brook, Chickering, and Edgewater, listed on the Dover zoning map as residential undevelopable land. It will be more detrimental to the land, which is in a very sensitive wetland area. 37 neighbors have voiced their negative opinion. The project is not in the best interest of Dover. I feel we must respect the rights of the citizens who have lived here for many years and protect our future residents and our precious rivers and streams. And then I could put another sentence and say we will be denying this on the merits of the Farm Street Trust decision made in 2001 or wherever, you know, you have to put that in here someplace. I didn't even put that in my thing. I thought we could just deny it because it's just not a good project for our town when everybody's against it and it's in a sensitive area and land that was not buildable. The whole thing just
Alan,
seems to be. Go
Nancy?
ahead. Sorry.
I have a question, Alan. So if the state appeals their decision, so going back to your original comment, so we lose control, but then you said that we could do something to what Nadir was suggesting. Are there some caveats we could put in there? So we can.
Okay, so first of all, it's not the state that appeals, it would be the applicant.
Okay, sorry. Yep, go ahead.
The applicant would appeal, and they appeal not to the court, but to a special entity called the Housing Appeals Committee. I think that's what it's called. And that agency board, whatever the proper term is, would rule on the decision. Now, Nina, if whatever the Housing Appeals Committee decides, is that appealable to the court?
Yes, that's appealable to the court. The one question, and I'm not, I assume that the Housing Appeals Committee at that point, once they overturn the town's decision to deny on the basis of the Farm Street Trust, they would then reach a decision on the merits of the project itself. And that would be HAC's decision that we would then appeal.
Okay.
So does that make sense? So we wouldn't, it's unlikely that we would appeal just that eligibility under Farm Street Trust issue by itself, which is why we've recommended that the town, in the alternative to denying on the basis of the reasons cited in Farm Street Trust, also consider conditions and waivers in the event that the Housing Appeals Committee does in fact reach the merits of the project.
Right. Okay, so Nancy, here's the basic possibilities. If we vote to deny the application under the Farm Street Trust decision, that gets appealed. Let's assume the applicant appeals to the Housing Appeals Committee. If they affirm our decision, then there can be a further appeal by the applicant to the courts.
Correct.
If the HAC overturns our decision, they would also, as Nina says, issue an order that the permit be issued, and presumably could impose whatever conditions they think are appropriate. We could then further appeal that to the courts if we wanted to. But whether it gets appealed or not, if we're overturned and the Housing Appeals Committee imposes conditions, they might entertain, we don't know for sure, apparently this has never happened before, but if we suggest conditions we think are appropriate, they may be willing to include those in their decision that the permit be issued. So this is our chance. There's no further chance down the road if we lose the appeal to have any further input on appropriate conditions. So the idea here is that if we deny the permit application, that we also express our views on conditions and hope that the HAC, if they overturn us, will incorporate some or all of those into any decision that they make. Laverne?
Do the Board of Health and the Conservation Commission have weigh in on this at all?
Yes, so they didn't go to, they came to us first.
Yeah,
They didn't go to the Concom. They do still have to, Nina, you can tell us in a minute, but I assume they would still have to, well, Nina, why don't you tell us whether it still goes before the Concom and the Board of Health, or whether the HAC bypasses that if they overturn us?
Yeah, that's an interesting question where they don't have all of their local approvals that are needed yet. So to back up a little bit, as I think you guys have been, you guys know through your experience, the comprehensive permit process takes place of all the local permits that are required for an affordable housing project, but it doesn't supplant any state requirements that are implemented by local boards and committees. And the two you mentioned, Laverne, are the two relevant ones, which is Title V requirements enforced by the Board of Health, and then Wetlands Protection Act requirements enforced by the CONSCOM. I would assume that you know, how the applicant goes forward with permitting their project is up to the applicant. I would assume that the applicant would go forward and get a decision on all of the local permits before taking it to HAC. I don't know that that's a requirement that they do that. I think it's certainly probably more efficient. But I don't think that's up to us.
Well, Nina, isn't there must be a deadline for appealing our decision if we deny the permit. Would they file an appeal and still at the same time go to the Concom and the Board of Health?
Yeah, they must. I can look into that and get back to you on that, Alan.
I don't think it matters in terms of what we do tonight, but it just be interesting to know how it works. Okay. Anything else, Laverne? Did that answer your question?
yeah.
So Nina, just to be clear, so the waivers that they put in front of us, they now could still go to the wetland, they could go to the Concom and the Board of Health and get approval on those waivers, or do we hold the authority to approve those waivers?
No, you hold the authority on the waivers they're requesting. What they go and get permission or the approvals they get from CONSCOM and Board of Health are just on the state requirements, the Wetlands Protection Act requirements, not waivers from locally imposed requirements. That's your jurisdiction as the comprehensive permit granting agency.
Thank you.
So what are the chances that they would just be denied from our own Board of Health? Just because of the sensitivity of the land? I mean, might they just get denied and all of this will be a moot point?
I don't know, and I don't think we have a basis to make that determination yet. My understanding is that they haven't provided plans sufficient or specific enough to determine whether they would comply with Title V or the Wetlands Protection Act.
Wow. A lot of hurdles.
Yeah, so we don't have to deal with that. That's the applicant's problem and the other board's problem. But in any event, from everything Nina said, I don't think it makes any difference in what we do tonight. So it looks like step one would be a motion to deny, which we'll get to in a minute. Step two would then be, if we do deny it, a motion to recommend that if our decision is overturned, that the HAC or the state agency impose appropriate conditions. Nina, would we need to say anything about waivers? Or if we don't say anything about granting waivers, would the state simply grant the ones they've requested? Or do we need to specifically say we will?
They would probably be granted. I mean, the state would just essentially use its own discretion to determine the validity and applicability of the waivers at that point. The suggestion that I think we've made is a fairly common tool in kind of the broader litigation world, which is you're going to be making a decision in the alternative, right? So you're going to decide that you're going to make your preferred decision, which is you believe it should be denied on the basis of the criteria set forth in the Farm Street Trust case. However, if HAC disagrees with you, this is the decision on the merits you would have reached. So the recommendation that we've made after the denial is that you actually go through the process of issuing whatever decision on the merits you would have issued for this project, but for Farm Street Trust. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but they've got a specific list of requested waivers.
Right, just as Red Robin did, right? And so with Red Robin, you went through and you made determinations based on each of the waivers, right?
Yep.
I think I would recommend that you do the same thing here.
Okay. But they can't, if we deny the application and they appeal and win, they can't then expand their list of requested waivers, can they?
Correct, I think that's correct.
They're limited to whatever they asked for now.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else, board members, have any questions or comments before we start the motions?
So Nina, I am curious on sort of the material, whether the sort of change in the window and kind of the visibility of the unfinished space is a material basis that should have reverted it back to the funding agency, or if that's actually an independent ground to kind of deny because of the sort of distinction that now exists between, or potential observable distinction between the affordable and non-affordable houses, or affordable market rate.
Nadir, I didn't understand your question. Can you say it again?
Yeah, so through the course of the proceeding, I think they added a roof above the garage or on the front facade of the house. They added a window, sorry. In that window, in the market rate houses, you're going to see a finished space that would be presumably visible from the sort of front road. In the affordable unit, that's going to be an unfinished space, which would then have kind of framing wood and no drywall. I read from the sort of FOIA request that the agency seemed very on alert for anything that would distinguish one house from the others, right? That would sort of make the affordable house identifiable. And to me, that strikes me as something that would, in fact, make the affordable house distinguishable from the market rate houses from sort of outward observation. And I'm just curious, is that if that would be sort of an independent basis to deny the application, or if that would be something that would have required them to go back to the funding agency, and they haven't done that yet.
So I think it's a good question. I don't think that I think that if they are proposing a structure for the affordable unit that is different than the market rate units, that you can certainly add that as a basis of denial or raise that concern for HAC. I don't know that for the particular distinction you're talking about, whether HAC will agree with you that that is a visible structural difference.
Got it. That's helpful. Thank you.
Nina, I don't know if you were there or heard the discussion of that during the hearing, but the affordable unit upstairs over the garage, that space is not finished. Whereas for the market units, it is, that those are bedrooms and whatever. So if you're looking from the outside and there's no shades or curtains, that sort of thing to block the view, you would be able to tell from the street that the affordable unit is not finished in that space, whereas the other units are. So the question is whether we can either impose a condition such as requiring suitable screening of the window, or that they not install the window, something like that makes it indistinguishable, or whether that's a basis, because they haven't done that as part of their proposal, whether that's a basis for denying.
Right. So I don't. So the standard for denial, I think everyone here knows that there is a very strong presumption that these projects should be approved unless you can find no condition that will ameliorate the concerns you have with respect to the project, such as, I believe, the Farm Street Trust example. There's no conditions that would deal with that situation. However, when it comes to this issue of the window, you can only deny it if you cannot come up with a condition to ameliorate the concern. And as you're talking about, if making sure these houses are finished with interior window structures such that they can't be differentiated from the outside, that's a condition you can impose.
So Nadir, we need to come up with some language that would say that they have to do X, Y, and Z for the affordable window.
Yeah. Or you could say they have to I apologize, I'm jumping in here, Alan, but
that's fine.
You can say a condition. You don't necessarily need to determine it for them. You can say the fact that it is unfinished inside cannot be visible. It either needs to be finished, or the fact that it's unfinished can't be visible from the public way, for instance.
Okay.
Does that help, Nadir?
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. So I would suggest and would entertain a motion to deny the application for a comprehensive permit on the ground that allowing the developer to build on 4 non-contiguous unbuildable lots would mean that the expectation that the lots would remain vacant would be violated, with no immediately tangible public benefit from building on 3 of those lots, as the houses built on 3 of the unbuildable lots would not be affordable, but rather the type of market rate houses that were assumed to be prohibited. Nina, does that make sense, or is that too complicated? Anybody
So
want, anybody want to make such a
Never
motion?
ask a lawyer if anything's too complicated, Alan.
I thought that sounded great.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second,
All in favor? Let me do this.
Oh.
Given the nature of the circumstances and the fact that there may be an appeal, let's do a roll call. Nadir, how would you vote?
In favor of the motion.
Laverne?
In favor of the motion.
I vote in favor as well, and then we'll ask our associate members how they would vote. Nancy?
In favor.
Mike?
yep, I vote in favor.
Okay. So the motion passes unanimously. So let's move to the issue of if we get overturned on an appeal, what do we want to do about conditions? Nina, one thing we could do is we had a list of conditions in the Red Robin Pastures case. A lot of those, some of those apply here, some of them don't because of the difference in the nature of the projects. Do we need to make a motion that spells out specific conditions, or can we say that we want to incorporate the conditions we specified in Red Robin to the extent they are applicable here, and then just spell those out in the decision?
Yeah, you're not gonna like my answer here, but you need to make a findings with respect to the each of the conditions and then vote on them here. And then they'll get memorialized in the condition, but I think you need to discuss and vote on the conditions.
Do we need to vote on them each one independently, or can we vote on a whole package?
You can vote on a whole package. Some boards do vote them each independently. It depends on what your standard practice is, and how much discussion there is, with respect to each condition, but you can do either.
Okay. And before we do that, maybe we could talk about the waiver requests, just to indicate for the record what we would, if we get overturned on an appeal, whether we would grant the requested waivers or not. Are there any specific waivers that anybody would find objectionable given the input from our peer review consultants and the applicant? I know, Laverne, you said you have general concerns about all of this, but
Yes.
we need to
I'm just reading the waivers again. I gotta,
yeah, so there's a 2-page list. Let me just run through them. One is the minimum frontage requirement. They want a waiver from that for the first lot on Trout Brook. Second one is for the front setbacks and side setbacks on the various lots, not all of them, but some of them. One is the perfect square requirements for lots. One is to allow access to lot 1A over the newly configured lot 2A. Another is a waiver of the Dover wetland protection bylaw to the extent that it's more strict than the state requirements. One is a waiver of the requirement that tree locations be shown on the plans for all the lots. One is a waiver to allow removal of more than 50% of the tree cover within the buffer zone for all of the lots. One is a waiver to allow disturbances and structures within setback zones. One is a waiver of the requirement of 4 test holes for each septic system and to instead follow the Title V standard. One is a waiver of the requirement that subsurface sewage disposal systems not be less than 100 feet from any open surface drain or water course. One is a waiver to allow soil absorption systems to be constructed in areas with groundwater less than 3 feet below the existing surface on 3 of the lots. And the final one is a waiver to not require a 50% increased infiltration area for lots because garbage grinders will not be allowed. And our peer review consultants have indicated that there's no basis for rejecting any of those requested waivers. Does anybody think there's any reason to oppose them anyway?
I don't think we should allow any of these waivers. Why should we allow waivers?
So Laverne, here's the way it works, Laverne.
Yeah,
The whole point of 40B,
yeah, is to get waivers.
40B.
But what if the town Concom and the Board of Health will look at these things, won't they? Will they look at these waivers?
They won't look at the waivers. What they will look at is whether the project complies with state requirements under Title V and so forth. But the whole point of 40B is to allow them to get these waivers from local requirements that are more strict than state requirements. And that's
So all
what
of these waivers, if this was a state requirement, would they be allowed?
so everything they're asking for waivers for, they're still saying they will comply with state standards. And as long as they're doing that, we have no legitimate basis for denying the waivers. So even though you don't like waiving the local requirements because they're strict, we really don't have a good reason for denying the waiver requests. Unless you know something that our peer review consultants don't.
They don't.
That's what I was.
The whole
There may
time-
be good reasons, but you need to state what those good reasons are.
The whole time I was listening to the peer review, I kept thinking to myself, whose side are you on? Really, I don't know.
Well, they were doing everything they could to help us, Laverne, and they came up with some problems with the initial proposal, but the applicant was able to fix them.
Right.
Yeah.
Which
And
is
look-
what you want.
And right, that's the role of the peer reviewer is to provide an objective review, not to advocate for a specific position.
And they found problems, but they were able to fix the problems. And if they can fix the problems, then we don't have a basis to deny the application just because we don't like it.
Hmm.
So, so I guess I would entertain a motion to, if our decision denying the application is overturned on appeal, that we vote in favor of granting the requested waivers. You have such a
Would now be the time to suggest if there are conditions attached to some of these waivers? So, for example, the tree cover, sought to allow greater than 50% tree cover removal within the buffer zone. I think there had been some conversation around adding additional trees to offset the removal of those trees.
Some of these lots are going to be clear cut. They're taking all the trees down in a couple of the lots.
I think Nina's going to say that we can make that a condition, but not a basis for denying.
Agreed. Sorry,
I think
was
what I think you can do, as far as the vote goes, Alan, I think you can just say that you're voting on these waivers subject to the conditions you're going to vote on for the project.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to grant the requested waivers should our decision be overturned on appeal, subject to any conditions that we vote to recommend.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second,
All in favor?
second,
All in
Aye.
favor?
Roll call.
Okay, so it passes unanimously.
Sorry, Alan, do you want to do the roll call?
Yeah, Alan, roll call, please.
Okay, let's do a roll call. Nadir,
I vote for the motion.
Laverne,
Vote for the motion.
and I vote for the motion. Nancy,
In favor?
Mike?
in favor.
Okay. So that motion passes unanimously. Now let's talk about conditions. Um, well, I came up with a number of, what I did was I went through the Red Robin decision and found the ones that I thought most obviously would be similar. So what I'd like to do is just list them for you, and then you can tell me if there's any more you think we ought to add, or if you think ones I propose are not appropriate. But here's my initial list. That the applicant obtain an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission, that the applicant obtain a permit from the Board of Health under Title V, that construction be done in accordance with the plans submitted to the board, that there be no activity in the area subject to the scenic roads bylaw, that submission of detailed landscaping plans, that they submit detailed landscaping plans that provide meaningful buffering for the abutters, which is something we discussed with them and they said they were receptive to. That the affordable house shall remain affordable. I think they said that would be the case in perpetuity. That construction activities take place only between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Something similar to there, but to Red Robin, but not the same, that there be no parking on Claybrook Road. That they use all feasible best efforts to minimize inconvenience to residents. That they ensure that all erosion control measures are in place. That all fill shall be clean fill. That no stumps or construction debris be buried or disposed of on site. That they comply with all applicable noise regulations. And then the condition Nadir was discussing about the front window for the affordable unit must not make that unit distinguishable from the market rate units. That's my list. Anyone have others?
Yeah, I have one, Mr. Chairman. The space for the market, the affordable unit, the space above the garage is big and empty, and it's ripe for building another living space, more bedrooms into the house. There's a door that leads from out, that's internal, that leads from inside the house to that space. They have to not put that door in. That would be a condition. You cannot access that space from inside the house. And what can do is put a drop-down stairway where it's above the garage. You can have a drop-down stairway that will allow you to get at that space, because I assume that some of the HVAC equipment will be mounted up there and operated up there, and they'll need access to it. But accessing that space from inside the house should be gonzo, because that's how people start to develop it as another living space.
So you want to keep the person who purchases the house from from converting that space above the garage into living space.
Right, it was like Red Robin. Remember when they initially proposed it, the units on the top
We're gonna
floor
have
had lofts.
Hmm.
This is kind of the same thing like a loft, right? You can put people up there and have them sleep, so they can be living amongst the other people in the house. This is the same thing as the loft, right? We're worried about the septic systems. The septic systems are designed for 3 or 4 bedrooms, and you start adding bodies into there because you can develop the space, and maybe you can even make money by renting it to other people. Now you're overstressing the septic system.
Nina, does that strike you as a appropriate condition?
Sorry, Mike, could you tell me the condition again?
Prohibit any owner of the affordable house from converting the space above the garage into living space. An extra bedroom, so for example.
Right. Because there's a door that leads you from the inside of the house to that empty space. So it's right next to the bedrooms on the second floor.
Right, I mean that's going to be limited by their Title V certificate anyways, right? So I think because the Title V is going to tell them how many bedrooms.
And then they don't have any storage space, right? Because they don't have basements. So then you're saying you can't have storage on that second floor. You have no storage.
They have basements.
Well, I think he's
Basements.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mike, was the suggestion that they can't use it for an additional bedroom, or they can't use it at all?
They can't use it at all because it's potential for people that own the house, and they own the house, the owners, so they can pretty much do what they want, developing that into extra living space. I mean, it's a natural. That's what people would do. I mean, it's just human nature to expand and make it more comfortable, add more people.
So I think if you tied it to a bedroom and Title V approvals, that's valid. I don't think you can make a condition that says you can't use the space at all, because that's got to be tied to some legitimate concern, such as septic. And if it's just using the space, then it's not a septic issue.
Okay, that's fine. If we could tie it in that way, that's fine. Makes sense.
Okay. Anybody else have specific conditions that they think we ought to add to the list?
Yeah, I had another one on the top of my head and I lost it. So
We'll give you time to come up with it. Nancy, Nadir?
I'm good.
Anything else that they think we ought to be suggesting as a condition?
Well, I mean, can you put a condition on that you can't put a swimming pool in there? Or will that be something that needs to be figured out if they make an application?
I'm not sure. Given how they're squeezing these houses onto these lots with limited space, I'm not sure there's room for a swimming pool, but.
Yeah, just to be clear, if they were to build anything else, they need to still seek permits to do that. So they would have to come forward and seek a permit for a swimming pool. And at that point, they would have to comply with whatever regulations are in place.
Okay.
Do you normally need a permit for a swimming pool?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay. I've never done
Depending on the size of the lot and approvals from the Board of Health.
Okay.
My neighbor has a swimming pool bordering on the wetlands, like really bordering on the wetlands. He got all kinds of orders, conditions.
Okay.
I'm in the Old Meadow Swamp. You realize that?
Any other conditions anybody thinks we ought to consider. Mike, did you come up with your wayward?
No, it must not have been of much merit. So I don't remember what I was thinking about.
If
Okay.
they go forth with a project like this, is there a time limit? Like, will they all be built at once? Or would they just do one and then another year later do another one? Or I wonder how that time limit would go.
Well, I think normally there's a requirement when you get a building permit that you have to start construction within a certain period of time. But there's no reason for them to delay construction.
Right, I get it.
They're going to want to get their money from building and selling the units. So
Construction can be phased if that's what they're proposing. I don't know if they propose to phase construction here.
They haven't said anything about it that I'm aware of.
Neither.
So they could phase the last house could be the affordable house.
I assume so.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's no requirement that they do the affordable unit first or second or third, then
I don't know that that's right. I apologize for not knowing this off the top of my head, but I believe if and again, I'm usually dealing with bigger projects here. You may be able to impose a condition that says, you can't get a building permit for the market rate units until you have a building permit for the affordable one.
But that still doesn't require that they construct them in any particular sequence.
No, but a building permit is only good for a certain amount of time. So they couldn't build the 3 market rate houses and then sit around for 10 years before they build
The affordable.
Would you have separate building permits for each of these parcels?
You could.
Do you have to, or do you know?
I don't think so. This is a bit of an unusual situation.
But I'm just, normally if you're doing a 40B project, I assume you get a single building permit for the whole thing. I guess we could say as a condition, to the extent they get separate building permits, they have to do the affordable one first. That makes sense?
That's right.
Or certificate of occupancies. You definitely would get different certificates of occupancies for each structure.
So the condition would be that they get a certificate of occupancy for the affordable unit before any other units? Does that make sense, Nina?
That makes sense to me. I believe I have seen that as a condition before. But I would need to confirm that would be a valid condition.
Well, we're proposing conditions and the state agency doesn't have to adopt them. So if they think it's inappropriate, they could always just ignore our proposal.
Absolutely, right.
Okay. Okay, any other conditions anybody thinks are suitable?
So I had in my notes that I think it was Cliff's letter 5A that there was reference to a condition for no staircase from the back. But as I go back through, I'm not entirely clear on what I tried to document there. I don't know if others from the board recall that conversation. It's that there are elevated rear decks off the main living level. However, none of the 4 structures include a stairway that would connect the back deck.
That's correct.
And so it was going to be, I don't know.
Yeah, I remember there was discussion about that. Did they say they weren't planning to have any?
There's no stairway to the back off the back deck.
Right.
But then I see that the applicant, or the sort of one of the bullets, is that the applicant has stated that adding a stair from the deck to grade will be choice of each owner to make. And I think I had in my notes that there was a willingness to have a condition of no staircase from the back to avoid something, but I don't quite have reference to what that thing was, which may not be all that helpful.
So a condition that there be no staircase coming off the deck in the rear of the house.
But to Nina's point, I'm not sure what value that would tie to, like, or what interest that connects to. So I'm not sure that it's a useful condition. And perhaps it's to avoid some level of differentiation between the houses, but that's on the backside. So I doubt it would be something that would be concerning. I don't know.
Well, I guess one possibility is there's all these houses are going to have wetlands pretty close to the back of the house. So
Right.
I think it was around the wetlands. They didn't want
Right.
to go down into the wetlands.
But how a staircase has any effect on wetlands, I'm not sure, as long as they're not in the unbuildable area of the lot. Is that a big issue for anybody?
Not really.
Okay.
Mm.
The thing, unless we have a clear reason to
I agree. Sorry, I was just flagging in case others had stronger
that's fine.
thoughts.
I think, throw it out there and we can
Yeah.
discuss it, and that's fine. Okay. So I guess we've covered the bases. So Nina, do I need to list all the conditions that we proposed again, or can I just refer to them in the motion as previously discussed conditions? Or do you want us to vote on each one?
No, I think as long as your motion states you vote to approve the conditions listed at the meeting by the chair.
Okay.
That sounds good.
And I don't think there were any conditions that anybody added that we want to pursue, right?
Other than the sort of condition to ensure that the window, I forget exactly how, I think Nina may have worded it.
The front windows, the way I wrote it down was the front windows must not make the affordable unit distinguishable from the market
street.
rate.
Right. Thank you. For example, by finishing the space.
And then that they also have to get a certificate of occupancy for the affordable unit first. So I added those to my list.
Yes, I like that.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion that if the board's decision denying the application for a comprehensive permit is overturned on appeal, that the board recommend the imposition of the conditions previously listed by the chair as conditions for any permit that is granted.
So moved.
So moved.
You have a second?
Second,
Okay, let's do a roll call. Nadir,
Favor of the motion.
Laverne,
I approve the motion.
I'm in favor. Nancy,
In favor.
Mike?
In favor.
Okay, so the motion passes. That's everything, Nina, that I had for us to deal with. Is there anything else you think we need to address?
I believe.
Okay. So we will work with town council to get a decision drafted. This should be a little easier than the Red Robin, hopefully. And then we'll circulate it for comment before we finalize it. I want to thank everybody. It's been for a fairly simple project. It's been a while that we've had to deal with this, and
A lot of meetings.
but we've I'm pleased with the process, and think we've done a good job of listening to the concerns of the people affected, and hopefully, no matter what happens with our decision, whether it gets appealed, and if so, whether it survives, I think we've done everything we can to do what we're supposed to under 40B and at the same time protect the interests of the town. So I want to thank everybody for their input and participation.
We want to thank you, Alan, for your calm demeanor when some people were not calm. Excellent job.
Well, thank you. It's my job to try and if I can't show self-control, then I can't expect anybody else to.
Well, yeah, I guess.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
To move. So moved.
Also, let me also thank, before we vote, thank Nina for her help on this. We appreciate that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Nina.
Okay,
Good
all in
job.
favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, we're done. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.